Henry thinks I taste delicious. Oh, gosh.
Is that right?
Yeah, he keeps looking at my
I don't think that has anything to do with taste. I think it has to do with pathetic brain damage. Hey, look, there we are.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sunday School with Sarah and Mason. Today it is...
And Henry.
And Henry.
Who will not stop licking my arm. He thinks I taste delicious.
And Henry. Okay. All right. Well, welcome. We're glad to have you here. We're excited about today and a little bit anxious. And
I'm not anxious.
That's about it.
I'm not anxious. You are the one that is anxious because you said that you don't have this fully mapped out. And that makes you a little bit nervous. So do you want to talk about that? I'm pulling out my counselor card right now.
Is that what that is?
Is that something you would like to talk
about? Should I pull out the Henri client and say no?
That's okay. I call that resistance. But yeah, sure, that's okay. I will allow you to have your own boundaries.
Just need to understand a little bit about me. I know the scriptures really well. And
the Mormon scriptures.
Well,
the Bible
what other
too.
Scripture is there? Don't argue with me.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Gosh. I know the scriptures really well, and for a long time when it has come to preparing lessons and trying to teach people and help them to see perspectives, whatever, learn, it hasn't taken very much preparation on my part, mostly because I can come up with a couple of really good questions and just guide a discussion from that, and be able to really feel like perspectives are changing and people are learning and those sort of things. Since trying to do this Sunday school that is not a specific religious class, I find that I have a smaller arsenal of things to pull from just via recall. And so as we go through a discussion, and the other piece is that there's not immediate feedback. So we'll get some questions occasionally, of course, and we address those, but there's not immediate feedback except from you.
Sorry, I started laughing because I was like, oh, so that just means Sarah likes hearing herself talk because that doesn't bother me.
I'm going to not comment on that.
Well, go ahead. Sorry, that's what I just wanted to explain why I was laughing because you said that and then I started laughing and I was like, he has to know what's going on in my head in order for that. Sorry, keep going.
So anyway, today I found, in preparation for today, I found a few kind of, I guess, just quotes that are some that I completely agree with, some that I don't completely agree with, but still help to kind of spark a discussion about things that are important. And so the hope is today that we can just throw those up on the screen and we can kind of discuss those and how they apply to the subject of today and how we as individuals can do a better job of managing the struggles that come from this particular situation.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to reframe to check for understanding, just to make sure that I understand what you're saying. So what I hear you saying is that when you're teaching a group of people or an audience, such as we're doing in this forum, we've got, our viewers and, later our listeners on the podcast, that you do better in an environment where you can see them, they're in front of you, and you can have that two-way engagement. You're more comfortable with that forum of discussion rather than not being able to read the room and see how they're taking things in, if they're understanding the concepts, that immediate question where you get the opportunity to clarify yourself. And so this leaves you feeling a little bit vulnerable or maybe a lot vulnerable because there's not a prescribed correct answer like there was in the Mormon church. You had, the box or the circle of the correct answers that you could always, if things felt like they were going off, you could always pull it back into that circle or the box, however you want to view that. But really the piece that's missing for you is seeing how your audience is experiencing your teaching, because you're a great teacher. I'm going to say that. Is that an accurate assessment?
Mostly, yeah. I'm not.
So where did I mess up?
I don't think that you messed up at all. It's just recognizing for me that there's not as much. So for instance, like you said, if a conversation was going off in a direction that really wasn't appropriate or wasn't helping us to understand this concept better, I could pull out a scripture that says, well, let's go to this and see if we can pull things back to where we're going.
So it's like
now I don't have as much material that is non-specific to Christianity or to Mormonism that allows me to just kind of pull things in the direction that I want to go. And I don't have the feedback from the audience to ask questions that might send us in a different direction, because that's also okay. Oftentimes in lessons, I'll come in with a specific idea of where I want to go, but somebody will ask a question that takes us in a completely different direction, but it's a good direction. There's nothing wrong with that direction. And so we'll go that direction. Yes. Because frankly, if you have one person in this audience or you have 50 people in this audience, they're the ones that are trying to benefit from the material. So if their questions lead us in a certain direction, it is often appropriate to go in that direction.
Right. So, I love that. Well, and I just want to add, I've always admired your ability to teach. My experience of watching you teach is mostly from Mormonism, because Mason was the bishop for a few years. You were the gospel doctrine teacher for several years, and you're an excellent teacher. You're really good at engaging your audience. I've heard positive feedback about you when you've done some of your continued education stuff at work. People enjoy the way that you teach, but your experiential expertise is to have a live audience in front of you. And so, not being able to see all of you is uncomfortable. I think that your anxiety makes sense a little bit, but I also have a lot of faith in you. I know that I think that you do great on here, and I am biased. So maybe what we can do is a call to action to our viewers and listeners. Hey, if you're watching this, we would love it if you, logged into YouTube or your social media accounts and left a comment or even left a question for us. We're going to be doing a show in the future where we address questions that have been emailed to us and whatnot. So that way we can get a little bit more of that delayed engagement and interaction. Absolutely. But we would love to see your feedback. We'll definitely work on responding. We have a good solid team of media moderators, our social media moderators, and then the YouTube moderators that let us know when there's a comment that, if there's a question or something, they let us know. So it's not us having to monitor all of those accounts. So when you just give us a like or something, we're not going to hear about that unless we get on ourselves and see those likes. But when there is a comment that our moderators are like, hey, this person's asking a question, then our media moderators will shoot us an email or a text and say, hey, on this platform, you've got a question that is, requires an answer or some feedback that we think that you should engage with. And they're very good. I've gone, behind them a little bit as the boss of Daisy Girl Communications should. And I've gone through those accounts to see, what are they alerting me to and what are they not alerting me to. And I've just got to say, my social media team is doing a really stellar job at alerting me when things need our attention. And that's been a really helpful thing. So please, audience, leave us some feedback. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. We are very good at receiving negative feedback as long as your feedback is constructively worded. If you're being a bully, we're not going to engage with you there. So don't be an asshole. Don't be an asshole, and we'll have a conversation with you. But if you're going to be an asshole, we have boundaries and a lot of self-respect, and we'll be like, peace out. Bye. All right.
Kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Go ahead.
Last thing there, Alex, is I am not a questions at the end kind of person. So if a question comes up, please put it on the screen, and that way we can address it right then, or we can address it later if we need to. But I'm a questions as they come kind of a guy.
Yeah. So one more
Um,
disclaimer that I think is important. I know, oh my goodness. So for those of our audience who are not aware, I have a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. And I had an MRI and my neurologist said, hey, looks like you're still in remission. This is great. And then I went in for my neuro-ophthalmologist exam and that doctor was like, no, you are actually in an active state of relapse. And I am definitely beginning to feel that. And so you might, as an audience, especially since there's some visual here, the way that my MS affects me is I will often lose my words. I might stumble or stutter. If I have to go to the bathroom, I don't get I have to go right now because those muscles aren't working. So I might have to jet really quickly. But the biggest thing that I don't want you to worry about is I have a tendency to shiver or shake. All of a sudden, it usually only lasts a couple of seconds. But if that happens, or if I suddenly lay down on the floor, it's because my service dog, Calvin, who I don't even know where he went. I think he's behind that chair over there. My service animal is right here to alert me in case that's going to happen. So I have a service animal that alerts me before I have a seizure-like episode. It's not an actual seizure, but I get a drastic shift in my blood pressure from it. And my service animal, Calvin, recognizes that, lets me know. And then if I lay down flat on the floor, I don't have the episode in a way that is really uncomfortable and damaging. So should you see me shiver, shake, twitch a little bit, that's what's going on. I'm sober, I promise. Go. I am sober. This is a caramel macchiato from Starbucks in my Daisy Girl or my unpacking cup. Go.
All right, Alex, pull up number 1, which is mean, right?
Mean.
All right, so this is the title we're working with today.
Oh my goodness. You let me see these before, and I did not notice the play on words. Go ahead.
It's a good thing you just went through that 40-minute explanation about MS.
That has nothing to do with it. Goodness gracious. I just wasn't focused on it. That's funny. Go ahead.
So I imagine we've all heard things like, I'm just being honest. I'm just saying what I believe. Mm-hmm. I'm just telling you the truth, those kind of things. And those oftentimes for me feel like just an excuse to not think about what I'm saying.
Well, that's because it's a thought-stopping technique. It's framed in a way of, this is just who I am and you have to accept it. It's a thought stopping. It stops the speaker, it stops the receiver of the message from being able, I'm wording this wrong. The speaker who says, I'm just being me, it's a way for them to cut off thoughts so that they don't have to hold accountability for how their words or actions are affecting the person they are speaking to. It's a way to shut down the conversation. It's the idea of, I'm the one saying it because this is who I am. You just have to deal with that. And so it really stops connective communication. And if you're communicating with somebody, especially if you have a relationship with them, you want that connective piece to occur in order for you to meet that, on my little sign up there, my Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's the blue line in it. So it's the one right in the middle, which is your sense of belonging or the human need to, nurture friendships, families, sexual intimacy, partnership. It's that community piece. And so when you're communicating in a connective way, it meets a basic human need. Whereas when you're shutting down the conversation and not communicating, it separates you from that and it causes a great deal of contention. And the end result is nobody really gets anywhere in the conversation. Did I just take over your lesson?
I'm just processing what you said because I agree with that. The big piece, I think that I feel like the biggest piece that I want someone to get from a statement like that is that it's a conversation stopper. it's not a conversation starter. So if someone comes to you and they're just rude or mean to you, for one, it's really hard to hear their message. They might be right, but it's really hard to hear their message because you feel attacked. Whether or not that person is meaning to attack you, or whether or not you actually are being attacked, you feel like you're getting attacked because the way that they're saying it is rude and disrespectful to you as a person. And so what I want to gather from that, because a lot of this is me learning too. I want to communicate in a different way. I try to do all of these things, but we all screw things up. So the first thing I want people to recognize is that when someone comes at you in this way, it is not because they want to have a conversation. It is not because they want you to understand or that they want to understand you. It is because they want to shut down the conversation.
Right.
And I can't say that that's all the time. I don't want to do that.
That's just your experience.
Right. Well, and because oftentimes people will do that because they just don't know anything different. They don't know how to do it in a healthy way. So it's not that they're trying to shut things down. It's just that this is the only way I've ever done this. And so it's how I'm doing it. Well, and so there is some room for grace on our parts, recognizing, you know what? That's just how that person has always communicated. This is how this has always gone. And maybe there's some room for us to, in a lot of ways, ignore what it is that they're saying and address it, what it is or how they're saying it, so that we can get to a place where there's real communication going on.
Well, and I think one of the things that's really important to recognize is that the majority of time when somebody is coming at you in a way that is cruel or attacking or whatever, they're coming from their amygdala, for one. There's some self-protection there. But I would say that the majority of people, when they speak up, they have a desire to be understood. And oftentimes the way that desire to be understood presents itself is in the "I'm right, you're wrong" verbiage. And that while it feels really good to be quote unquote right, it's really that bid for connection that the Gottmans talk about. They are desiring to be understood, but maybe they don't have the communication skills to say it in a way that stops the listener from also experiencing an amygdala response. Because if I come at you with, you know what, Mason, that is the stupidest thing you've ever said. How dare you? You are hurting people by what you're saying. What happens is your amygdala comes on because you're not trying to hurt people. I've insulted your intelligence. I've criticized you. That's so stupid, or you're so stupid, or you did this. That's that criticism piece. And so naturally your protective barriers also get involved. And then what ends up happening is it's an amygdala fighting an amygdala. Yeah. And it takes a great deal of effort. And oftentimes, if not most of the time, some time and space from when the person says something and you respond back to be outside of that amygdala space. But if you're having a conversation, it's really hard to be like, wow, that was really offensive. I need 20 minutes before I can respond to you, because then that, it's like, well, why do you keep walking away from an argument? So you end up creating this cycle that is really toxic. And so it takes effort on both parties or multiple parties, parts, in order to get to a place where the communication can be healthy, so that everybody's opinion is heard, understood. And usually when you are understood and your intent is understood, you find that you agree more often than you think you do.
Well, and that's kind of the point of this whole conversation, is how can we recognize when things are not going in a healthy way, recognize when either we are in our amygdala or they are in their amygdala, and recognize what it takes for us to stay healthy so that we can have an important conversation. I don't know when I was going to fit this in, but when Brene Brown does something called the 10 Guideposts of Authentic Living, and it's, I think it was basically one book. She talks about all of these, But in the presentation, the power of vulnerability, she goes through all 10 of them briefly as well. But the very first one I want to read here is cultivating. So she gives, this is what we want to do as opposed to this. So she says, cultivating authenticity, that's what we want to do. We want to be authentic to ourselves. We want to be who we are, true to ourselves, and letting go of what people think. And the reason why I brought that up just now is because you talked about, maybe I need 20 minutes to walk away from this conversation for a little bit. We have to be able to stand up for our authentic selves and recognize what will benefit us, our health, and in turn, whatever conversation we're trying to have.
Right.
What will benefit us the most? Will it be to not get called by the other person as just a coward walking away from a conversation, whatever stuff they might say to us? Or will it be recognizing I'm not in the best place anymore? That really triggered me. I need some time to step away. And we've heard things.
I'm gonna pause you there. Another piece of that is I'm gonna walk away because when I engage with you in this conversation, I become something that I don't want to be.
Right.
And so that boundary is also for, I don't like me right now. And so I'm going to disengage so that I can continue to live and be the person that I want to be. Like in the epilogue of my book, one of the things that I said was that one of the reasons why I cut contact with my dad, number one was for the safety of my children. But number two was because when he and I are in the same room, we both act foolish. I turn into a rebellious, asshole, bitchy teenager. And so I don't like that. And that's one of the reasons why I don't have a conversation with him, is because when I'm around him, I can't be true to my authentic self. I turn into somebody I don't like.
And recognizing that about ourselves is really important for us to move forward. Alex, can you put noise up there? That's the next one. This is, I think, kind of a hard lesson to learn, because oftentimes we're in a discussion, quote unquote discussion, that is maybe an argument rather than a discussion. We're not usually communicating even at all, or at least not communicating very well.
Right.
And so, and I haven't been great at this. So I'm learning this. Like you mentioned something, you said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard anybody say, right? As part of a conversation. And I've had that said to me, and I've said that to somebody. And as I think about it, I'm like, that's not true to who. You
said that to people? What?
Not often, but I said it to my dad the other day in that conversation. Yep. And as I look back on that, that's not who I want to be. That didn't help the conversation.
Nor is it true.
Right. It's also, I can't imagine that it is ever true, but it's certainly not true very often.
I mean, there's something somewhere in your history that somebody said that was the stupidest thing you will ever hear.
I'm going to have to change it. That's the stupidest thing I remember you saying. But
still not helpful.
The
Don't
point
do
being,
that.
Right. The point being, it does not help the conversation.
Right.
And as I recognize those things in myself, in fact, can you put the
well, hang on. Before he changes that, I want to say, Mason, can you identify arguing? Because arguing is very different.
Yes, but can you put up fool for a second?
Rude.
Yeah.
He's going to listen to you instead of me. I'm the boss.
So this is directed at me. It is the peculiar quality of a fool to perceive the faults of others and to forget his own. I don't want to be in that situation. Oftentimes we're very good. If you look at it from a Christian perspective, it's, the mote and the beam, let me help you with the mote, which is a small little flick of dust basically in your eye before I take care of the beam in my own eye. We can recognize what people do. We can recognize that they're not doing things appropriately. So it's not that we can't do it. It's that oftentimes we need to be reminded, and what about me? Not a no, that's not the case, but yes. And what about me? And sometimes it's really hard.
Well, and one of the things that we learn again,
you can go back to the one, Alex.
One of the things that we learn in the Gottman curriculum, when I teach this to my couples, when I do couples therapy, is that as each partner identifies the beam in their own eye or expresses their own vulnerability and takes accountability for that vulnerability, it heals the relationship. You know, if you and I are talking and you say, you know what, Sarah, every time you interrupt, I blah, 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 blah. And then I have to say, you know what, Mason, yeah, you're right. I have a problem interrupting, and I'm much better now than I was before. Like, you know, I'm much better at not interrupting now at 40 than I ever was when I was in my 20s. But that doesn't change the fact that when I interrupt you now, it's still bothersome because it's still disrespectful and rude. And I understand that I've got, you know, some ADHD. So it's a little bit, I mean, I sometimes will just cut right in and bowl people right over. I never do
Really?
it. This is totally a, if I
Hypothetical,
ever,
yeah,
this is a hypothetical. If you're listening to our podcast, I'm lying right now. But no, it's still rude. It's still disrespectful. It's not who I want to be. And if I'm like, look, I've gotten better since my 20s, you just need to notice my progress, that harms the connection between us. Whereas if I say, you're right, I did interrupt you, I'm sorry, I still struggle with that on a fairly regular basis, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And that allows, because I've taken accountability for my role in that allows you to actually express more grace towards me, because you do see my effort.
Yeah.
Even
it allows me the chance even to say that.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, then I can say instead of you going, yeah, but I'm so much better, which almost feels like an excuse for not doing it right now. It can be instead, you're right, I still do that. And I can say, yeah, you're right, you do, but you are so much better. And then we can both recognize that there's been improvement while there still needs to be improvement. Well,
and the reason is because when I say, but I'm so much better, from me, that's my amygdala like, please notice that I'm getting better. But for your amygdala, that's like, but you are not recognizing that it still really bothers me. Right. And so when I'm willing to speak my vulnerability and own my part in that, it's really healing, because I'm taking accountability for the portion of the conversation that, if it's gone south, my part in that.
Yeah.
And that's something that I work on teaching my couples all the time.
Right.
But you still didn't answer my question.
Well, because you haven't shut up yet. I'm not wrong.
Get over her. Answer the question.
So,
Brett, you're such a brat. Did you drink coffee this morning?
No, because I don't need coffee to bounce. I don't need coffee to bounce.
You're picking on me.
The wonderful thing about stickers. The stickers are wonderful things. All right.
Are you making fun of my ADHD?
No, I was making fun of me.
He's making fun of my ADHD.
I was making fun of me.
Uh-oh.
I don't need coffee to bounce in the morning. So I love music. And if you think about, for me, if I think about this, the difference between music and noise is what it does to my brain. For instance, I can't stand rap. And for those of you that like it, fine, whatever, right? Like it's whatever.
I like clean rap.
I don't even like clean rap. So it's not just about the filth of the language. I just don't like it. It does. And what it does to my brain is it agitates it. It agitates my brain. Instead of calming my brain, which is what music will typically do, it just agitates my brain. And so if you're asking the question, what constitutes an argument? The first thing I'm going to say is to take that and ask a different question of you, of the listener, is what scrambles your brain? And in a lot of ways, we talk about the amygdala. What takes you from being in a place where you can think about what's being said and what you're saying, and puts you in a place where you're now on the defensive, or you can't think about what is being said, or you recognize that they're in that place and they can't think about it. What things do that to you? There are some consistent ones, I imagine. There's things that will do that for most people. For instance, if you feel attacked, if you feel belittled, if you feel misunderstood or not understood,
right?
All of those things are going to lead you to a place where now you feel like you need to be defensive, or now you feel like you need to shout louder, or now you feel like you have to shout longer. You know, the idea of don't ever go to bed angry is kind of a stupid idea for some people.
Right.
Because
it's okay to go to bed angry, y'all. You go to bed, you sleep. Hopefully you wake up in your frontal cortex so you can carry on the discussion.
Right. Well,
from
you're
a better
you're
brain
rested
space.
now. You have some time away from it. And we've had arguments like that. We gratefully haven't argued that much in our lives, but there's been times where there was no settling it at night. We went to bed. We went to bed angry, and in the morning, most of the time, both of us were like, "I'm sorry,
dude. We were stupid last
Right.
night." That's
We were
normally we're
able to
like,
say-
what the hell is the matter with us?
right?"
That was
We were
dumb.
able to say,
Mhm.
"What the heck? Just what happened?" Right? Instead of, and so for some
and
people,
then we have amazing morning makeup sex. Just saying.
okay.
Look, he's
The
blushing.
point-
Zoom in, zoom in. Look at how cute your little red cheeks are.
The point
Your
being,
beard hides some of it.
The point being that it is important for us to be able to reflect on what causes us to feel like we're in an argument, so that we can then avoid those triggers.
Yeah.
And what allows us to be authentic to ourselves, so that we can walk away from a conversation,
Right.
or change the tone. Like, for instance, and I feel like this has happened a lot with my brother in particular. There's this
Which brother?
There's this feeling that 95% of what he says is directed specifically at me as a person. And
do you mean as like a character attack, or
as more of a character attack, or as kind of that wanting to shut you down kind of a conversation?
right?
And that is just my perspective. Like, if I went through, I imagine it's probably not 95%, but it feels that way. But if I recognize that that's what's going on, and I can recognize that I'm also doing some of those things, I might be able to, in the midst of that conversation, just stop and say, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to approach you that way.
Right.
I'm attacking you too. And that's not who I am. That's not what I want to do."
So how
and
often?
then, hold on, and then be able to say things like, "I need a break. I need to step back. We need to talk about something else. Can we readdress this again tomorrow? Can we readdress this in a half hour? I need to go eat. I need to do something that will take me out of my amygdala, because I am demonstrating by those things that I'm not in my frontal cortex.
Right.
I'm demonstrating that I'm doing things that actually drive me flipping crazy. I do not want to see those things from someone else. And so, like the time when I said to my dad, "That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard you say. That should have been a trigger to me. I need to step away."
You said, "Should you owe me $1?"
No.
How often have you been successful at doing that with your brother or with your father? The ones that get you the most, how often have you been able to actually follow through and do what you just said you should, I hate that word, do?
On occasion, I've been successful in doing that. I was very successful on this last one, with the last exchange with my brother at the end. But in general, I've struggled with it as well. And I've also started to recognize that it may be superfluous. It may be that I'm not going to make a change in the way that he communicates with me. And
Right.
so it's time to step away from that kind of conversation.
Well, and that brings me back to the Gottman stuff. Is, when I'm teaching my clients this stuff, I'm like, you cannot just utilize this in any conversation. You have to be able to recognize when the parties don't have the skills to communicate in a healthy way. Because
Right.
if you open up your vulnerability to somebody who doesn't know what to do with it,
can you go to exchange, Alex?
you can get really hurt. And I think that that's one of the challenges that you're running into with some of your family members. I know it's a challenge I've run into with some of mine, is that the skill to have a healthy conversation isn't there. And, it's difficult to get these communication skills unless you're putting in effort to learn how to do it and find value in communicating in this way. And it's just not something that they've had the opportunity or taken the opportunity to do. And I don't want that to be taken as a judgmental thing. Everybody's life journey is different. And if the way they're communicating now is working for them, then there's no reason for them to change it. You know, you and I learned how to do this because when we got married, we both said, we do not want a marriage like either of our parents. And
Right.
so from day one, you and I stumbled and struggled to be like, okay, we don't like where this is going. And we got really good at taking a break and resetting and coming back to it and listening different. And then when we got the Gottman skills, things just got so much
Right.
easier. And now it's just the way that we talk to each other. You know, I look at us and I can say we've had, I don't know, in 24 years of marriage, 10 to 15 arguments, and the majority of those during the year that I left the church, or the 9 months after I left the church out loud. The majority of those occurred.
Certainly the fiercest ones.
Yeah, they were bad. But that's, I mean, I find that to be a great accomplishment. And it's not because you and I rock, although we do. It's because we use that healthy communication technique that we got from the Gottman curriculum in order to facilitate healthy connective communication. And it's worked really well. And frankly, it's gotten us through a lot of shit. So I'm actually, while you go into your next thought, I'm going to grab the book. I think I have it. Sorry, Henry. I think I have it because I want to hold it up. I really want our listeners to know this is one of those books that I believe needs to be in every library and be read and marked up and wrinkled in every library out there because it teaches you the skills that I'm talking about. So I'm going to stand up and grab it real quick.
When obviously this is easier to accomplish if both sides of the conversation are working on it. You know, if I have unhealthy communication skills and Sarah has unhealthy communication skills, but we're both working on healthy communication skills, we're going to be more successful. And sometimes we just have to recognize that the other person doesn't have those skills and isn't interested in gaining those skills, or that they won't gain them from me. Because, you know,
Scooch.
my brother, the one that I'm talking about, the only person I've ever punched in the face, we loved each other growing up, but there was also a lot of antagonism. We're a year and a half apart. We lived in the same room until I left on my mission. So there's a lot there, and I'm probably not the best person to teach him a different skill. And so I need to recognize that as well. And I've been slow to recognize that.
Well,
but
and it's good that
I'm learning.
It's good that you say that because, no, stop licking me. It's good that you say that because you didn't learn the Gottman curriculum from me either. You had to read the book, and then you spoke about it with your counselor, Jackie, a little bit in order to gain those skills. So I do not have the hard copy of the book. Yeah, that one. Thank you, hon. I don't have the hard copy. It's actually the book that gets stolen the most from me, meaning I loan it out to my clients and it never comes back because they get better and then they don't come see me anymore. So I've got the Kindle version. Maybe.
I need to get up.
All right, I might need to get up closer. Let's see. Yeah, that just looks like a bunch of white. Let's see if
You could just tell them the title.
You can't see it. That makes me angry. Woo!
Because
Okay.
it's white.
Yeah, I know. I can't change. Okay, so it's the 7 principles for making marriage work. Let's see if I get really, really close. Oh, there it goes. The 7 principles for making marriage work by John Gottman. This is my Kindle version. The cover of the hardback looks the exact same.
Yeah. So
Come on, Henry.
the other thing.
Henry, come back.
So when it comes to recognizing what an argument is, there's this quote here, which everyone has had adequate time to read by now. But discussion is an exchange of knowledge, argument an exchange of ignorance. And I don't mean that the person or persons arguing are ignorant and don't have, I don't mean that to be that their ideas suck, basically. That's not what I mean.
Right.
It's just demonstrating that the people involved are either ignorant of the fact that there's not communication going on, or ignorant of the tools necessary to allow for communication to going on. So, and this is all about recognizing this in ourselves. Unfortunately, if we want to change the way that we discuss or argue things with people, we have to start. Well, I cannot tell someone else to do it. I have to start. And I cannot change the way that they do it. I can only change the way that I do it, in the hopes that it will allow them to recognize that change as well and grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the big thing that I wanted to pull out there.
That's one of my favorite quotes of the ones that you have today.
So the next one is, what is it? Establish, Alex. So kind of the same thing here is that we find, and this is, again, not a jab at anybody who's doing this.
Yeah, I was going to say, this one I think sounds a little condescending.
It can be, and that's not the point of it. And recognizing that someone can say something incredibly intelligent and still be condescending is also important, because I know I do that sometimes, and I know other people that do that as well. But the idea being here that oftentimes what happens, and this would happen in the Army all the time,
right?
The idea that, well, I said it, so this is what we're going to do, and I'm going to shout louder until it gets done, demonstrates that you may not have the ability to actually back up what you want with reason. Well, you may not be able to actually explain, well, this is what we're doing and why. And to be fair, in the Army, sometimes you don't have the time to do that. And people need to be able to listen right away. But there are lots of situations where you use that as a tool for compliance when it is not necessary, and it would be better if you took the time to explain it.
So the thing I don't like about this is that he who establishes his argument by noise and command, it's not that the reason is weak, in my opinion. It's more that they are not utilizing or don't have the skills necessary to express themselves in a different way. Sure. Because oftentimes that noise and that command, the reason is very valid. The reason is very important, which is why I think this is condescending, because you're basically saying, oh, because you're talking loud, la, 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 la.
Yes.
What you're saying is not important. And that's really disrespectful, and it's just not accurate. So
right.
I don't like this quote.
This is an opportunity for us, if we find ourselves in this situation, to step back and just evaluate what's going on.
Right. Get curious about what's going on.
Is he yelling because his reason is not valid? Or is he yelling because his reason is really valid and he just doesn't know how to share it in an appropriate way? And so if we just write somebody off because they're doing this, that's not going to help us either. This is all about helping us to communicate better with the people that we're struggling to communicate with. Right. So if we ever, and we don't want to fall into this black and white thinking of, well, because they're shouting at me, obviously our argument is invalid. That's just not the case.
I mean, if I was in your brother's mind right now, I would say, Mason, you're being noisy and you're commanding us about, you posted this meme to create noise. Your reason is crap.
Sure.
That's not your intent. It's not accurate. Your reasons for posting are not something that he understands at this time. And so, I don't think it's about that the reason is weak as much as maybe there's a lack of skill or ability to communicate about it differently. Well,
and again, going back to the Fool one by Cicero, if I don't recognize where I'm faulted on that as well, it's not going to change. It's not going to improve. And so this is not about learning to see these things in other people so that we can call them out on it necessarily, but so that we can find healthier ways to deal with it ourselves. Because frankly, if somebody's in their amygdala, calling them out on it is probably not going to be very helpful. So it's about recognizing how this is going on and what we can do about it to be healthy and authentic to ourselves.
Absolutely.
So the next one is communicate. Are there any questions, by the way, Alex? So,
Hi, Michael.
seems the key term here is establishes, meaning the thrust of the argument is made in tone and projected authority. I like that. I think that is exactly what I was trying to get from that, is that there's this idea of my authority trumps yours, my ability to shout it trumps yours, and so there's no real consideration for what the argument is. Mm-hmm. It's just, no, this is how this is going to work because I'm the prophet. I'm the husband. I'm the authority, father.
Therefore,
I'm the boss.
Man, you're talking about a lot of patriarchy here. What's going on with that?
It's the world we live in.
What's the book where it's like patriarchy? Ugh.
Yeah.
What book was that?
That is the burnout book.
The Burnout, but who wrote that?
The Nagoski.
The Nagoskis. Oh yeah. Okay. Oh, love that book.
Terrific book. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's another one that's been stolen from my library.
But yes, so it's kind of like the blustering thing, right? So if you recognize that somebody is blustering, it's usually because they're trying to hide some sort of inadequacy, either in their reason or their ability to explain. Like, it's not always a control thing or power thing. Sometimes it's just, I don't know how to explain this, and so I'm going to bluster in the hopes that you'll just do it.
Can you say bluster one more time? Because it's so darn cute.
Is it? So if they're blustering.
Because your whole head shakes.
So if you recognize that there's blustering going on.
This morning, I think I drank too much coffee again.
If you recognize that there's blustering going on, it can be a clue to the fact that there might be other things that need to be recognized. It might be that their reason sucks. It might be that they just don't have the capacity to share their reason. It might be that they don't feel like they have the time to share their reasons.
Right.
There are other things going on. It is not an excuse to just write off their reason or what they're trying to say, but it can be a clue into the fact that there might be other stuff going on there. All right. So people who can't communicate think everything is an argument. And of course, there's a lot of things in here, like everything. I don't like it. Right. I don't want this to be an all or nothing thing. But a lot of times, maybe even most of the times, people who don't communicate well think everything is an argument. And the only reason that matters is because we need to be able to recognize that when we're in that situation. Like if I recognize that this person just doesn't have the skills to communicate his idea without being an asshole, then I can step back and go, okay, wait a second, what's going on here? Oh, we're arguing because he just doesn't know how to express himself appropriately. And that can allow me to either address it differently, address it at a different time, or say, I'm not addressing this with you anymore at all.
Right. I think that recognizing the setting is always very valuable. It comes back to maybe, if this person is responding to an argument or a discussion in an argumentative way. Let me rephrase that. If this individual is responding to a discussion in an argumentative way, and that's not like them, what else could be going on? Are they sleep deprived? Are they hungry? Are they hot or cold? Are they tired? Am I saying things in an inappropriate way? Am I hot?
Hungry?
Am I cold? Am I hungry? Did I drink too much coffee? And so now I'm making fun of the person I'm trying to have a discussion with, those types of things. But so recognizing the set and setting is so important. And I know that we've said that many times before. And yet, one of the things I'll tell my clients on a regular basis when I'm teaching them these skills is they look at me and I'll help them rephrase something. And they're like, man, this comes so easy for you. And I'm like, well, yeah, it does come pretty easy to me when I'm the mentor and I'm the coach and I'm the observer of your conversation. But when I'm the participant with my own husband, it gets harder because it has a different meaning. And so we've got to be able to recognize, where is each person at, which is why arguing and debate on social media can go south so quickly is because you can't tell what state. Like the other day, your brother sent you this horrific text, which we read on our podcast, by the way, and dissected it on the podcast with and without the expletives. And then later he's like, I was mad about something else and I took it out on you. And there's no way for you to tell that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm going to say, hey, pick up your damn phone or Zoom or WhatsApp or FaceTime or Google Meets or something and have those conversations face to face, because 80% of your communication is nonverbal, and you cannot get those nonverbal communication skills out in your text. And emojis do not replace nonverbal communication, although they can help a little bit. But please do not emoji your way through conversation, which is also a lot of times people are more comfortable communicating through text because then their nonverbals are hidden, or they don't have to deal with somebody else's nonverbals, so it feels safer to confront in that way.
I think it's
it's dangerous.
I think it's also easier to overwhelm the conversation with the text because you can write down so many different things.
Right, you can get like 10 points
really
without being interrupted by your dang wife.
Right, it's really hard to then deal with it. And that can be good, but it can also be really bad. I mean, if somebody asks you a complicated question, it might be helpful for you to be able to write out the answer, but it also can be very harmful. So just recognizing that that's the case. Oh, the thought I had was, your client saying this is really easy for you. The idea is it does not matter how big your frontal cortex is. Meaning how much you know about this stuff. It does not matter how big your frontal cortex is when you're in your amygdala.
Right. We're all victims of our own biology, for sure.
Right. It just doesn't matter how much you know when you're
maybe
in
not
your
victims.
amygdala.
We're all susceptible to our own biology.
Yeah. And of course, the more you know, the more you might be able to move from that state and more quickly.
Well,
but
I'm going to say,
if you're in your amygdala, you're in your amygdala.
Sorry, I interrupted you again. I'm going to say, I keep picking stickers out of his face.
I see that.
It's not so much about how much you know. I would say it's more about how much you practice, because I, from an academic standpoint, was a Gottman fan from the get-go. But I was not a expert in utilizing it. It took a while, and I tell my clients, after 90 days of treatment, you've got the skills to really begin to use this stuff on a regular basis where you don't need my help anymore. But to get to a place where this is the way you communicate on a regular basis can take 6 months to a year or more oftentimes. So,
And I think that's part of the reason why it's so important to recognize when these kinds of things are going on. Like, I don't like talking about the bad things either. Somebody on Facebook is talking about, why are you just focusing on the negative things about the church? Well, the reason I'm focusing on the negative things about the church is because those are the things that are hurting people. Right. It's not because they're the overwhelming majority. I don't even believe that even now.
Right.
They're the things that are hurting people that organization refuses to acknowledge, at least in my opinion. They refuse to acknowledge those things, which is why they need to be brought up. In fact, my answer to her was basically, and people are mostly good too, but that doesn't change the fact that one of the overarching messages of Scripture in general is repent. Like, God is constantly telling us, or his prophets, or whoever you believe they are, they're constantly telling us we need to repent, we need to change, we need to fix the things that we're doing, but we can't do that if we don't acknowledge that they're there. And so same with these kinds of things. We can't fix the way that we argue or who we argue with if we don't recognize that an argument is what's going on.
True.
So the second part there is people who lack accountability think everything is an attack. I don't really know how I feel about that. I think it can be important to recognize that one of the reasons people feel attacked is because they're not being accountable, but that goes both ways too. So,
I'm going to say once somebody's in there, once somebody's in their amygdala, feeling attacked is a pretty common brain space to get in.
Any other questions, Alex, up there?
Doesn't look like it. Keep going.
I think that was the...
Is that the final slide?
I think that's the last one that I had. Let me make sure.
Man, you've talked a lot.
Yeah. Totally. So just go back to the last one, which is the fool. I just want to reemphasize the fact that this discussion is really about me learning how I can do things differently. I might be a small part of the problem. I might be a big part of the problem. But if I don't recognize my part in the problem, I can't fix it. One of the things that, oh goodness, why won't you apologize? What's her name?
Harriet Lerner.
Harriet Lerner. One of the things that she says in there when she's talking about apologizing is that we all need to acknowledge our part in an issue. Mm-hmm. And of course, I can't force you to acknowledge your part. I can only make sure that I acknowledge my part, mm-hmm. whether that's 1%, 5%, 10%, 50%, 100%, which is almost never the case, 95%, I have to be able to acknowledge my part of the problem. And so when it comes to discussions and arguments, I have to be able to recognize the things that I'm doing that don't allow me to be authentic to myself in an argument. Now, if you want to be an asshole, then I guess none of this matters. But I don't really feel like that's the case for most people. I don't feel like most of us want to be an asshole. We don't want to be belligerent. We don't want to be...
No. Most of us want to be...
Overbearing is the word I was looking for.
Yeah, most of us want to be understood.
Yeah.
And when people just cannot seem to understand us, we really need to check in with ourselves and acknowledge, how am I presenting the information? Because if nobody is understanding us at our core, we might be approaching or bidding for that understanding in a way that is not healthy. I have found really that most people that I engage with, I feel very understood by them, and that the people that I feel don't understand me is actually my family of origin. But most of the people outside of my family of origin have no issues with understanding me. And that's really difficult. And there's lots of reasons why it's so much harder with family, because there's certain dynamics set and certain patterns that have been set from the time we were really young that are very difficult to overcome. So, yeah.
Yeah. So there's one little, I want to read a little bit more of this Brene Brown thing. That's where I want to end. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before I do that?
No, I'm listening and playing with Henry.
I see that.
He's cute.
So I want to just repeat what she said. Cultivating authenticity and letting go of what people think. That's the first guidepost to wholehearted living is what she calls it. So being completely
say it again.
authentic.
I didn't listen. I was kissing Henry.
The first guidepost to whole-hearted living is cultivating authenticity and letting go of what people think.
I love the second part, let go of what other people think.
Well, and I it's incredible that through her research, she's been able to recognize the things that we want and the things that get in the way of what we want in a very pretty specific way. What gets in the way of me being exactly who I am? Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean, like, she's not saying be exactly who you are and never change that. Like, if you find that exactly who I am is not really who I want to be, we can work on that and cultivate being somebody different, but authentically different. Not just I'm going to be different because I'm supposed to. The letting go of what people think. So she defines authenticity as the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we actually are. Choosing authenticity means cultivating the courage to be imperfect, to set boundaries, and allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Expressing compassion that comes from knowing that we're all made of strength and struggle, and nurturing the connection and sense of belonging that can only happen when we believe we're enough. And there's more, but I just kind of want to end there, because if we're struggling with an argument, and there's ideas running in my head already about how I could have handled things differently in these scenarios I'm thinking of, and how I might be able to do that still. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't talk about it, if we don't think about it, if we find that maybe our tools aren't as sharp as we want them to be, if we don't discuss them with somebody else who might be able to sharpen our skills, then we are not being completely who we want to be. We can't be authentic if we don't have the tools to do things the way that we really want to be able to do them. And so when it comes to arguments and discussions, recognizing what constitutes an argument, and that's specific to me and to you, that will help us to avoid a lot of those pitfalls in the future. It will help us to strengthen relationships that otherwise are crap. It'll also help us to be able to walk away from relationships that we cannot repair or fix and be in a better place for ourselves.
Absolutely. Amen.
So,
preach it, brother.
So thank you guys for being here. Thank you for, I hope that this is also helpful for those of you that will listen later. And please email us. If you have questions from any of these discussions, email us so that we can address them either specifically with you or even in a podcast, because we want, if you have a question about something, it's likely you're not alone.
Yeah.
And so we want to be able to address those things.
And that email is
daisygirlcommunications@gmail.com.
Daisy Girl Communications with an S, just one S, at gmail.com.
Right.
All traditional spelling.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a terrific Sunday.
Thank you for joining us.